Welcome to Unit 7, Data Analysis and Probability. In this unit, you will learn to critique ways in which data are presented and solve problems that involve the probability of independent events. Topic 7.1, Choosing an appropriate graph. Each type of graph has its strengths and limitations. A line graph displays data that change over time. It's easy to draw and read, can use a zigzag when starting at a large number on the vertical axis, best shows data that change over time, and can be used to estimate trends. But one must be very careful when estimating trends because the trend may not continue. For example, this line graph depicting the share price of Apple stock from 2012 shows that the share price was quite low in 2009 and it increased quite substantially all the way to December 11, 2012. Now, one might assume that the trend is an upward trend so that overall this would continue going up and up over here, but we can't be sure of that. A double bar graph displays two sets of data that can be counted. The lengths of the bars are used to represent and compare data. It is easy to read, can be used to directly compare two sets of data, but can only be used to show discrete data. That is, data that can be counted. And it may be difficult to read accurately depending on the scale that's used. For example, we can very quickly compare the preferences of girls and boys in this double bar graph. And in this case, the scale is quite easy to read. So this would be 6, for example. This would be 3. Now in this example, the numbers are larger. Now I know this is small, but this says 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000, and so on. So any column that lands between those two values, let's say 2,000 and 2,200, has an amount or has a value that is not accurately determined. We'd have to estimate that that would be approximately 2,100 here. So that is also a limitation of bar graph. A single bar graph, pie chart, also known as a circle chart, or pictographs can also be used. What are the strengths and limitations of each of these types of graphs? Some strengths of the bar graph are that the heights or lengths of the bars can be used to compare values easily, and that it's quite easy to draw. Some limitations of the bar graph are that they may be difficult to read, especially when the bars do not end on a grid line, and that the graph does not show values as percents of a whole. Some strengths of the circle graph are that they show parts of the whole, and that each sector is shown as the percent of the total. Also, the size of the sectors can be used to compare them to each other and to the whole. Some limitations of the circle graph include the fact that the graph does not show numbers, but only percents. The total number cannot be calculated, and it's difficult to draw accurately without the assistance of technology. Some strengths of pictographs like these include the fact that the lengths of the rows can be used to compare values, and also that the graphs can be visually appealing, especially for younger learners. Some limitations include the fact that there may be lots of symbols on the graphs, so they can be difficult to read. They may be difficult to draw, and they do not show percent. Let's have a look at an example question. Nina owns a shoe store. These tables show data about the store. Question A. Which data would be best represented with a line graph? Justify your choice and create the graph. Well, you remember, a line graph best represents data that change over time. So if you look at these two tables, one of them shows just that. Table B is showing the yearly sales of her business. Okay, year 1, year 2, and her sales are changing every year. So of these two tables, this one, because it's showing change over time, makes the most sense to use a line graph. So what you want to do is just highlight the data, click on the Insert tab, and we said line graph, so let's select line up here. And then you can choose from this list. Let's go with a basic one here. So here is a line graph depicting her sales for the year, year over year, pardon me. And part B, which type of graph would be suitable for the other table? Explain and create the graph. Well, the other table shows the sizes of shoes that Nina's selling in the month of May, and the numbers of each pair of those size shoes that she's selling. So we're looking at two different sets of numbers. One that shows the size of the shoe, and the other that shows the number of pairs of shoes in that size that were sold. So a simple bar graph would be a good option for this. It can depict those two sets of numbers on each axis, and then we could visually represent the numbers of shoes using a vertical column or horizontal row. So we'll go to Insert, we'll highlight the data, including the headings here, and we will insert a bar chart. So we've got a vertical one and a horizontal one. Either of them would do. I'll choose the vertical one, and we'll click on it. So we have numbers of pairs of shoes on the left, the y-axis, and the size of the shoes on the x-axis. Topic 7.2, misrepresenting data. Different formats of a graph may lead to misrepresentation of data. Are these graphs misleading? How? Why might people want to show data this way? Is this pictograph misleading? Well, at first glance, the pictures of the pizzas are largest. However, each picture of each different type of food has the same value. So your first assumption might be that pizza is more popular. However, if you look closely, you'll notice that more images of hamburgers actually exist here, meaning that that would be the most popular choice. Now, why might people want to show data this way? Well, perhaps the maker of this graph likes pizza the best themselves, and they want to show that pizza is a popular choice. Is this bar graph misleading? Well, if you look closely at the numbers go up by 5. So it starts here at 950, 955, 960, 965, and so on, all the way to 1000. At first glance, this graph appears as though this bar in the middle is quite substantially larger. It is, approaching twice as tall as the yellow one, and it's over 7 times the size and the height of this green one over here. Do those values match the visual representation of the difference between those choices? The yellow representing pizza, red representing hot dogs, and green representing hamburgers. Well, if the number of responses for hamburgers was 955, and this bar appears to be more than 7 times as tall, you might guess that thousands and thousands of people want hot dogs, when in reality it's just over 985. So again, why would someone want to do this? Could be that their preference is hot dogs. They want to show that that is the most popular choice. Is this circle graph misleading? Well, one part of the circle graph, one sector of the circle graph, has been removed partially from the circle graph itself. That draws your eye to that section, making it appear bigger than it might actually be. So you could argue that this is misrepresenting data by showing a focus on one particular sector of that circle graph. Meanwhile, item D, we're not sure what this is, but item D is much, much greater. Let's try one more example. Have a look at this pictograph. Well, at first glance, this garbage can appears way, way larger than this garbage can. And if you look closely, this graph is showing that the United States is producing way, way more trash, or was producing, I should say, in 1980 when compared to 1960. Okay, if you look at the actual numbers, this garbage can represents 80 million tons, and this one is supposed to represent 160 million tons, which would be 2 times this one. Now, is this garbage can 2 times bigger than this one? Well, you be the judge. In my opinion, it's maybe 3-4 times more. I could probably fit 4 of those easily in this. So the scale is off. So it is potentially misleading. Now, who would be interested in making the problem appear bigger than it is? And that's not to say that it isn't a big problem. Of course, if the amount of trash is doubling, that is a problem. But to make it appear as if it was, being multiplied by 3 or by 4, perhaps people who are keen on criticizing the United States for producing too much trash